Hey everyone, welcome to this video where I'm going to be doing a deep dive on Synyster Gates' live stage era Axe Effects tone. For those who don't know who I am, I go by Kaner in the Synyster Discord, also known as Alex Kame. I'm a personal friend of Synyster Gates. I'm not an official Synyster team member, but I do help him with small things in the background. Now a little about the tone that we're talking about today. This is a tone that's given out for free by Fractal Audio for everybody that has an Axe Effects 3 or an FM9. So if you have either of those devices, you probably don't need to be watching this video. You can go download it for free and you can play with it. But I'm making this video because Syn was very insistent that I get an Axe Effects, so I did a couple of months ago. And this is for all of the Synners that can't afford an Axe Effects. They're very expensive devices. This is for people that are wondering why they can't get his tone on other devices, and for people that maybe want to start building their own tones but they don't know where to start. Now, I was texting Syn not long ago, and I asked him if he remembered anything about this tone. And because it's from the stage era, this is a while back, and he doesn't really remember much about it, but he does think that this may have been modeled around their song Paradigm, which I think makes sense, and we'll talk about why that is. Now, I don't want this to be a long video, but I do want it to be thorough, so let's start getting into it a bit. The guitar I'm using is a Kiesel Solo with Kiesel pickups and Synyster Gates Ernie Ball strings right into my Axe Effects 3 Mark II Turbo. Digital output into my Apollo Twin audio interface. The program or the application we're looking at right now is called Axe Edit by Fractal Audio. It just allows you to control parameters on your Axe Effects without touching the panel on the front of the Axe Effects, which is very difficult to use, and this makes it so much easier. Now, I loaded Syn's preset into my Axe Effects. It's called Syn Rhythm, which is a little strange because there is leads in here, and I'll talk about that. You can have up to 8 scenes in a preset, and a scene is basically a preset within a preset, or like a snapshot. Every device kind of has their own iteration of this, but when you click on a different scene, it'll change the settings. So when I click 2, you can see the enhance turned off and the chorus and delay turned on. When I click 3, you can see they switch back, and then it can control any parameter. So we're going to start on scene 1. However, on most presets, the scenes would be labeled. Like scene 1 might be labeled rhythm, 2 might be labeled lead, 3 might be labeled solo, and so on. For some reason, this has no names, and there's only 4 scenes, which is not that uncommon, but he's only using 4 out of the 8. So we're on scene 1. It says Syn Rhythm, but this is, to me, is a possible rhythm. It possibly could be, or to me, it might be some kind of lead. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This is your signal chain. The input is your guitar. These are blank. This is a rat drive, like the rat distortion pedal. Each scene has this, but none of them are turned on. And I find that very strange. Why have that in here when you're not using it at all? I don't know why that is. I didn't get to ask Syn about that. I thought it was just interesting. When you look at the settings on this rat, he's not using a lot of distortion. The level is at midway. The filter is at midway. To me, it looks like he was using it as a boost, but again, I can't really say because it's not turned on anywhere. So take that as you will. I don't know. I'll turn it on then. So we have guitar going into the amp. The amp that he's using is a 5153 100 watt on the red channel. So this is modeled after the Fender 5150 third iteration, the 100 watt version on the red lead channel. Super popular amp for rock and metal players. It's a beast. It's a great amp. I've played one in person. I own the 50 watt. It's great. Now, I do think it's a little weird for Syn, because he's never been linked to this kind of amplifier. There is a video clip of him in the studio, and there is one nearby, but there's no proof of him using one. So it's strange that he is using one, but however, it's not strange for a rock or metal artist to be using one. We will get into that a little bit more. The cabinet he's using is a 4x12 Hellwind impulse response. He does sell these on his website, but this free preset comes with one impulse response, and you can use it on other presets, so that's nice. So we're going from the amp and cab into this enhance block. Enhance block's a little weird. A lot of people think it's a double tracker to make it sound like 2 guitars are playing when there's only 1, but that's not exactly what it is. But it is for stereo imaging, and we'll get into that in a bit as well. You can see there's a chorus and delay block here. They're both turned off on this scene, but they'll come on in the other scenes. He is using a reverb at the end of the signal chain, and that just goes to the output. So this is what it sounds like. So it sounds really good. The enhance block, I'm going to turn that off so you can kind of get an idea of what that's doing. So here's with the enhance block on. Here's with it off. It's a lot less wide when I turn it off. And this kind of thing can be tricky. It does widen the guitar, but if you have two guitarists and you're using this as a rhythm, that can get really weird and thin sounding, and there's what's called phase issues. And that makes me think that this scene is a lead, because there are leads in the song Paradigm, and they do kind of sound like they have the enhance block on. So if I do a leady kind of thing, you know, it makes it sound nice and wide, which is what you want in a lead. When I turn it off, it's a little thinner. It's not as wide. So that's kind of the purpose of this. And that's why I think this is a lead, even though the preset's called rhythm. And also this reverb here. Reverb is something that you generally use a bit more on a lead. However, he has the mix set super low at 7%. So it's not doing a whole lot. And I know a lot of people that'll put a reverb at the end on a very low mix to make it sound like it's an actual amplifier in a room. Because in an amp in a room, you'll have reverb. So when I stop playing, you can hear the reverb. Without it, it's subtle, but it's there, and it makes a little bit of difference. Now, that's most of the first scene. We're going to get into the settings as well. So on the input, this is what... There's a gate. There's a noise gate on the input. So this is kind of the noise gate settings. Pretty standard. You know, it's a high gain amp. It's rock and metal. It's going to be a little noisy, but this gate cleans it up. So this is what the settings look like. That's pretty standard. Nothing crazy there. But in the amplifier, so on a Fractal Axe Effects, there's a million options. That I own a Quad Cortex. I own the Kemper. I have Helix Native. I've played around with all that stuff. None of them have the kind of options that the Axe Effects has. So if you're trying to recreate this on another device, you probably can't for a multitude of reasons, but all of these options are a big reason as well. So let's just look at his, the tone. So that's all like the knobs you'd find on the amp. So his gain is a little more than halfway, which, makes sense. It's pretty thick. The bass is a little less than halfway. Mids are cut a bit. The treble's up, and the presence is down a bit. Master volume's at 4. Level, this isn't an actual option on an amplifier. This just kind of controls how loud it is going out to these things. So I wouldn't worry about that. But these are the main controls of the amp that you'd find on the real amp. Pretty typical settings, nothing crazy there. When you go to Ideal, if you look at the difference, Ideal adds a depth knob. So this is now, these are the same options we saw before in tone. Now there's a depth knob, a little less than halfway. You can add a boost. He's not using a boost here. Same for the cut, same for fat. Bright is automatically on. I don't think that's something he turned on. That's just when you put this amp on, bright is automatically on. So that just makes the top end a little brighter. Now there's a bunch of preamp options as well. I can tell that he really didn't touch any of this. It's all pretty much where it is normally. Maybe the preamp sag, I don't know if he really touched that. But there's not a lot to see here, honestly. You can add a boost if you want. You can do saturation, but he didn't do any of that. The power amp modeling is on, negative feedback. Again, these are very advanced options that you probably won't be able to hear much, if I turn them on or off. So these are pretty advanced things that if you're a newer person, you really don't need to know about. Most of what you need to know is up here. That'll get you a lot of the way. So I'm just showing everybody everything in case they want to copy it or have better understanding. You can pause the video at any point and zoom in, look at what you want to, stay on it, whatever. In the power tube section, he's using 6L6 tubes, which is standard on this amplifier. I kind of thought this was somewhat surprising. I don't know, Syn has always kind of struck me as a EL34 kind of guy, especially in like the later years when he's playing Marshalls. I'm pretty sure his Hellwind was using EL34s, so that was a little surprising to me, but at the same time, it's pretty standard, and he may have overlooked this as well. Yeah, standard 6L6 is in this amp. Looks like nothing here has really changed. I don't think anything was changed here. There was just a bunch of extra options. Power supply sag is up a bit. None of this is really too important to the core of the tone. This is fine picking. There is a bit of an EQ curve on the speaker option. You can change all this stuff, and it looks like he has a bit. So you can see right here at 124 hertz, there's a bump, and then it starts to kind of gradually rise right here, and you can see all the EQ settings here, 124, all that, the highs. So there's also a speaker drive and compressor here. Again, these are very fine tuning options, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but this does make a difference, and I'll show you the other scenes as well. Input EQ, I don't think anything was changed here. You can see that there's a low cut right here. It's not really doing a crazy amount that you would hear, but it is cutting some of those lows. This is the secret sauce right here, the output EQ. This is how he has this graphic EQ set, and to me, this is a core of Syn sound. He always has like a picky sound. You can hear the pick definition. It's a little bright, and this is a lot of it right here. So you can see at 62 he has this up a bit. 125 he has it up a bit. He's cutting at 250. 500's up a bit. 1K he's cutting as well, and everything else is boosted a bit. So I'm gonna play with this on. And I'm going to turn it off. So that makes a ton of difference, at least to me. It also feels quieter, and that's because of the Fletcher-Munson curve. All these high frequencies and mid frequencies are kind of making it appear louder, but this really is the secret sauce to me, in my opinion. So it's very important, I think. So we're going to go to the dynamics, and nothing's really touched here as well. So that's basically all the options in the amp. In the cabinet, really not a lot. The Hellwind is very specific, and these IRs are a lot of the sound as well. Funny that I was talking about the secret sauce. This is also secret sauce. I'm going to add another cabinet, just a random cabinet, to show you what the Hellwind actually sounds like. It's hard to get that Hellwind sound out of other cabinets. So let me find like a, I don't know, Mesa? Yeah, Cali. So yeah, 4x12 Cali. So this is like a Mesa Boogie 4x12. And I'm going to mute the Hellwind. So this is the 5153 amp with a Mesa cab. So you can hear it sounds way different. It's kind of nasally as well. It's just a whole different flavor. A lot of people say that speaker cabinet is actually the thing that changes your sound the most, and I tend to agree. You can have a large range of sound just from changing speakers and speaker cabinet. This is another reason why you can't get Syn sound on another device for the most part. The Hellwind impulse responses. He only released them for Fractal products. There is a universal file format for impulse responses called a wave file, and normally people provide those and you can load it into any other device, but he did not provide those on his website. When you buy these impulse responses, they're only for the Axe-Fx. Now I'm trying to convince him to release the wave files, but that's a whole thing within itself. So we're going to move on. So cab more. I think it looks like these settings were changed a little bit, just proximity to the cabinet and some smoothing. You're probably not going to hear a lot of difference. Proximity is how close it is. Preamp, he's not adding a preamp. He hasn't touched any of this kind of stuff. Room and air. You can also add in room sound, kind of what I was talking about earlier by, doing an amp in the room kind of sound with a reverb. You could also do it here, but he's not touching anything here. And then this align is just when you're using multiple cabinets so that there's no phase issues. He's not doing that. There's only one cabinet, so nothing to see there. Again, we're going to come back to the reverb. Now, this reverb is based on a Bricasti M7 or some kind of other Bricasti unit. And a Bricasti unit is a very famous reverb that's used in a lot of studios. Recording Studio C is the reverb on the Axe-Fx, and that is the Bricasti unit. So here are the settings. You know, a little bit of time, pretty small size, no pre-delay, no feedback, anything like that. Small mix like we talked about, light spread. There's, you know, decay options here. Again, very, very thorough, and for those who are kind of newer, don't worry too much about this. These are the advanced options. Doesn't look like he really touched anything. Maybe some of the early reflections. Duck and mod, nothing really here. I think those are standard when you add this in. EQ, you can see the slope here. You know, slight cut here, little bump, but then, you know, there's a cut here at the highs. I'm not sure if this is standard or not, if he touched this, but I think it's standard. Pitch shift, he's not touching any of this. So that's basically it for the first scene. So we're going to move on to scene 2. When I turn on scene 2, the enhanced block turns off, chorus and delay turn on. Now I think this may be a lead or a solo scene, because when you add in chorus, delay, and reverb, that's something you add into like a guitar solo sort of thing. It gives it thickness and depth, and this is not something you'd use really on a rhythm. The delay that he is using is just a digital stereo delay. It's pretty generic that you'll find in a lot of devices. The amp settings are the same. The cab settings are the same. We don't really need to go over that. The chorus, he's using a Dimension 1. So that's based off of the Boss DC2 Dimension C Mode 1. And it's a stereo chorus. These are the settings. He's using a triangle LFO type. He has the rate right here. The mix is down pretty good at 15%. There's not like a crazy amount. Depth, number of voices. Looks like he really just opened this up and kind of set it on the default settings and then turned the mix down, honestly. Not a lot going on there. But it is a nice chorus sound. Again, it's a stereo chorus. For everybody that doesn't know what stereo is, it's kind of hard to explain to beginners, and I'm not sure if I want to get into that, but it's basically hearing in left and right. So it kind of thickens up the guitar a bit, and it's good for leads. So back to the delay. The time, 500 milliseconds, pretty standard. Some feedback there. Left and right time ratio is up a little bit. Feedback. Again, mix is at 15%. Nothing crazy. Nothing crazy at all. It's all a little bit. Diffusion time. There's really no diffusion going on. Nothing going on there. Really nothing going on. Modulation. It gets pretty technical here. Sine waves. All that kind of stuff. No guitar pedal has these kind of options. No other guitar device really has these options. This isn't too much to worry about. The EQ, it's just a light low cut and high cut. You know, it's pretty flat. Other than that, stack and hold, not a lot. So this is what it sounds like. So you can hear that's definitely made for a lead or a solo. You know, it's thick. It's moving. There's all that delay. You don't really want that on a rhythm. It's not bad, but it's, you know, we just don't do a lot of that. There's really not a lot to say. Like I said before, the amplifier settings are the same. He didn't really change anything. Yeah, it sounds good. So I'm just gonna move on to the third scene. This one's interesting as well, because we're turning off the chorus and the delay, turning back on the enhancer. So this looks exactly the same as scene 1. So when I click scene 1, everything's the same, except there is one difference. So in the amplifier, the amp output is 3 decibels louder on scene 3. So if you look right here, negative 15 decibels on the level. When I go to scene 3, it changes to 18. I'm sorry, I think I said it backwards. So this one's quieter. This one's 3 decibels quieter. So scene 3 is 3 decibels quieter than scene 1 is. And as you can see on scene 2, that one's also negative 18 decibels. So really the only scene that's negative 15 decibels is scene 1. It's a little louder, so that also makes sense with my theory that this is probably some kind of lead in Paradigm. This is probably a solo in Paradigm. And then scene 3, again, the same as scene 1, just 3 decibels quieter. Not sure why that is exactly, but here's what it sounds like. Sounds the same as scene 1. Nothing wild. So we're going to move on to the last scene. The last scene is possibly main rhythm. So he turned off the enhancer completely. So now it's just guitar, amplifier, cabinet, and reverb. That is pretty standard. You know, you could definitely use that for like a rhythm tone. Sounds good. The main differences in this one is that in the amps tone section, we're actually going to go to ideal because we need that depth knob. The main difference here is the presence and the depth and the master volume. So these three are different from the other scenes. So we're going to go back to scene 3. You can see in scene 3, the presence is at 3, the depth is at 4.5, and the master volume is at 4. That's actually the same as the first 2 scenes as well. So you can see scene 2, scene 1, they're all 3, 4.5, and 4. But when we go back to scene 4, you can see that he turned up the presence, he turned up the depth, and he turned up the master volume a bit. Again, not sure what he was going for, but I'm kind of thinking this is maybe a main rhythm. The other big thing that changes, I think, is this, the speaker EQ in the amp section. So this is in the other scenes, as scene 3, this is scene 2, this is scene 1. They're all the same. You can see that's a pretty specific EQ boost. It's a pretty specific graph there. But scene 4, it's flat. Very slight cut right here, super slight, and then a high cut, so mostly flat. He changed that just for this scene, and also the output EQ that we talked about earlier, there's just a boost in 2K. So if we go back to scene 1, scene 2 is the same as scene 3. 1, 2, and 3 are the same in this section. But when we go to scene 4, if you keep your eye on 2K, it's on 4.5. Scene 4, it's now at 5.4. So there's just a slight boost in 2K frequency. We'll play it again real quick. It's pretty standard. Doesn't sound too much different than everything else, but that's what he has going on. That is basically it. So that's all 4 scenes on Syn's preset. I'll go to scene 5. You can see everything's just the same. 4K. For some reason, that 4K kind of goes... 4K is the same as the 2K. Yeah, back to 4.5. It's actually a slight change. 0.01 at 125. I don't know why that is. Probably just a mistake. And this goes up a bit. But he's not really using these. You can tell there's nothing different. All the same. Nothing turns on or off. So, yeah, those are the main 4 scenes on this. So guys, before I go, I just wanted to turn on the rat drive to show you how it sounds with the rest of the signal chain, because I told you I would. So right now we're on scene 1, back to scene 1. The drive is off at the moment. I'm going to turn it on and play a little bit. Now, for this whole video, I had no licks planned at all. So if I don't sound good, don't make fun of me, okay? So I'm turning on the rat. Here's a little rhythm thing. So this is already a very gainy preset to begin with. Definitely didn't need a push by anything. It was fine where it was. Adding this distortion pedal to the rest of the signal chain is just a bit much. It's not a ton of distortion, but it put it way over the edge, more than it needed. The rat is an interesting drive too, because it's a little bit fuzzy. It's a little bit broken, like in the right way. But I don't really think the sound lends itself to anything, which is probably why he had it turned off on all of these. So here's a little lead thing. There's a lot more high end, and it's a little more spanky. I don't know. It is not necessary here. We're going to go to scene 2. Let's turn it on quick. Again, it adds more to it, you know, more gain. It's a little more liquid, but it's just really not necessary. This is a cool pedal on its own, and it's good for a lot of things, but this doesn't really lend itself to any of this. I'm going to skip scene 3 because it's pretty redundant to scene 1. Go to scene 4, turn it on real quick, do a little rhythm. So in those nasty chugs, you can just really hear the brokenness and the fuzziness of the rat. So that's what it sounds like with the rest of the signal chain. It doesn't really lend itself. So it really wasn't necessary, but that's what it sounds like. I hope you guys learned something about Syn's tone. If you have any questions, you can always just hit me up in the Discord. You can hit me up here on Synner. Just let me know, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you for watching till the end, and have a good day.